What's going on, everybody? It's Joe back from the Acceptable Casualties. I wanted to start up and do a little Fallschirmjäger tactics video for Flames of War version 3, version 4. I think I'll be able to play for both of these. My thoughts were to kind of put this together. It's going to be almost a bit of an evolution, I think, for moving from version 3 to version 4 for Fallschirmjägers and infantry play in general. It seems like it's going to be laid out a little bit differently. As far as what's going to work and what's not going to work. So, this is the initial tactics video, and as the tactics kind of grow and become new things, I'll probably update some of these videos as we go along. But this one right now is pretty much going to be list building at its core for version 3 and version 4. I'm going to try to do like a mix of both because I think the lists for Fallschirmjäger, they're not really going to change that much. I think what they are at their core is what they are, and there's not going to be a lot of variation as far as what you do. The strengths from what they were in version 3 actually roll over pretty well for version 4's list building. So we're just going to get into it right now. The list that I'm going to focus on are going to be the Bridge by Bridge Fallschirmjäger Company, and then the one out of Fortress Italy as well. I think the Fortress Italy one's on page, 74? I got the book over here. And then the Bridge by Bridge one, I believe, is on like page 23 or 26, somewhere in that wheelhouse. So for all you guys that play Fallschirmjäger or maybe are looking to get into it, the core of, I think, what you're building when you're putting together a Fallschirmjäger force is you're really building off of those two main infantry platoons that are going to be your combat platoons. For that, I think for this list to really excel from 1,500 points all the way up to 1,850 in that range, you need to have the two 10 base platoons with the Panzerfaust upgrade, and if you have the chance, the extra points also. I mean, actually make room for the extra points. Put the Panzerschrecks, at least one in each one of those platoons. Being Fearless Vet, at distance, they're going to be an absolute nightmare for your enemy to range in on and shoot with. Not for artillery as much anymore, but still for tanks, rifles. As long as you stay dug in on the ground and you wait for them to get into close range, it's going to be really tough for them to pick out bases. So what we're going to have to worry about now is going to be ranged and artillery. But for the most part, that's why you're going to bulk up your infantry platoons. If you're going to play a defensive list, which I think the Bridge by Bridge lends itself to that still, even though it's a little bit tougher for infantry now to sit back in the foxholes and really defend, it's still doable. And I think the Bridge by Bridge book, I think it plays to that a little bit better, more so than the Fortress Italy book. Not just because of the lack of the fortifications, but just with the trap teams and just the way that list is kind of comprised of what you can do with it. So so at its core, combat platoons. I think for both of those lists, you want to max them out with Faust and Schrecks. That's just going to be the core of your list. Same thing with your HQ, SMG Faust and SMG Faust upgrade. No brainer. You're going to need that anti-tank because if you're running a pure Fallschirmjäger list, you have anti-tank with the Flak 88s and the Pak 40s, but you don't have a lot of armor options inside your two main platoon options, which are going to be your weapons, combat, and regimental support. For the most part, all you're getting out of that is going to be Pak 40s and LG 40s that are going to be the ones that are going to be able to pop some tanks and have some serious punch. Everything else that you're going to get is going to be divisional support. And for version 4, obviously, those don't really count toward your combat, your formation morale. So you're going to have to pull something out of your divisional support still, I think, to help with the AT, but I don't think it's as vital as you might think. I think if you're going to pull out of those divisional supports to make up for the lack of AT in the core Fallschirmjäger units, for the Fortress Italy book, I like the elephant. One elephant parked there, and if you protect it enough with the two Fallschirmjäger units and maybe some other stuff sprinkled in there for your 900 points, because you're most likely going to be keeping 600 points off table in most of the missions, you can kind of bubble wrap that elephant a little bit. It's going to be a nightmare to pull off the table, and you put it out there early. It has a gun where it's going to be able to deal with anything, and it's going to be a huge deterrent no matter where you put it. No one's going to want to sit there in a shootout and deal with an elephant. And like I said, it's 300 points. I think there is a Confident Veteran. I think it's Confident Veteran for it as well. So, I mean, it's a little expensive, but nothing's going to be really on the table. It's going to be able to pop it for front armor that the Allies are going to be able to throw at it. They're going to need to get to the flanks, and if you bubble wrap it with your Fallschirmjäger platoons, I think you're going to be able to keep it alive. And I think for Fortress Italy book, that's a really good option. Some people make an argument for some Stugs and Panzers, but they get taken off the table real easy. I don't know. And I think a platoon of Stugs, Panzers, Panthers, anything like that, they're going to cost you more than a single elephant. You're going to get more firepower out of it. But I kind of like the Elephant. I think it's just a bigger threat because it can literally take out everything pretty much without a save. Whereas those other tanks, you're going to be getting into shootouts, and you're going to be able to get the volume of dice advantage, but you're a little bit softer of a target, and your gun isn't as strong. So, if you have one turn of bad dice and you lose an engagement, there goes your tank support. Whereas with the Elephant, like, things really need to go wrong, I think, for you to lose that off the table. So for Fort Citadel, I think that's a really good option. When you start looking at the bridge by bridge book for those divisional supports for your tanks, if you're playing the sixth Fallschirmjäger, it's different if you play the third. But if you're playing the sixth Fallschirmjäger, I think the Panzer IVs and Panzer III mix, it might be a better buy-in than just taking the Jagdpanthers or some of the other options in there, just because. One Jagdpanther with the top armor ones, it's still susceptible to some artillery strikes. Side armor 5, the planes can still do some damage to it, and it's only front armor 10. So if you're gonna be playing against like Fireflies, or if you're matching up against Soviets, we'll say whatever your matchup's gonna be, there's gonna be guns that can still punch it. So I think in the case for bridge by bridge, you're in better hands. I think if you go with a Panzer IV/Panzer III platoon that you can get out of that, or the Stug platoon. It might be a little bit more points-wise, but I think it's going to have a little bit more staying power and be able to do a little bit more for your list in bridge by bridge. All right, so that's just kind of what I'm talking about for your anti-tank divisional support. Let's get back to actually the core units or Fallschirmjäger. So we talked about having the 2 platoons maxed out with your Faust and Shreks added into them to give them that little extra punch against tanks defensively. Another thing worth looking at, too, is your machine guns. So most from what we've seen out there right now, a lot of people are running either tank heavy lists for version 4 or infantry, but with heavy tank support. It seems like that's what's going on right now. So the MG option, I like putting it in my list because it's 150 points, Fearless Vet, you have 4 MG42s. They're really nice to either have, just in case you're playing against the infantry or a recce list or even a mechanized list, to have that range and that volume of machine gun fire if you need it, if you're playing against your opponent, or it's just a nice 150 points to have off table to play reserves with, and then you can bring them on as a support role, and whatever you get out of them, you get out of them, or you can combat attach them if you need them against one of those infantry lists. So I think the MG42s, the MG42 platoon, I think it's worth taking if you're running a really pure Fallschirmjäger list with minimal division support and you're really focusing on your combat platoons, because like I said, they're only 150 points. You could run the smaller one, which is going to give you a little less wiggle room for your reserves, but it's also less of a point sink. So I think taking either a half or a whole really depends on what your opponent's going to be if you know ahead of time, or how much wiggle room you have in your points. I don't think it's one of the core units that you need to take, but it's definitely a unit that's worth having in your list just to fill some gaps and holes as far as being able to take out infantry. Because those Fallschirmjäger bases, they're rifle MG teams, so if they end up getting pinned, you're not going to have a great volume of fire and defensive fire, and once you end up combat attaching some of those MG42s in there against infantry platoons coming and trying to assault you, or even half tracks or armored cars or anything like that, you're going to have enough of volume of fire to at least pin them and beat them back. So it's worth thinking about putting them in there, opposed to maybe putting in some extra anti-tank or anything like that. It's just nice to have a little bit of extra anti-infantry volume of fire inside your lists. Another thing looking at too, I love the LG40. I absolutely love it. For 55 points, 45 points, I think if you run the Fearless trained lists for Fallschirmjägers, I mean, you get 2 strength 9 shots. Yeah, it's only at 16-inch range, but it's a great little throwaway ambush unit. It gives you an extra formation platoon for morale for 55 points. If you can fit it into your 900, absolutely fantastic to get them on the table. Use them as an ambush platoon for super cheap. If you can't fit them in there, then you just tuck them away and you throw them off table. And they're not going to be fantastic coming off that back table edge, but or wherever your reserves end up coming in. But at the same time, they still get a 3-up save now, so they're going to be a little more resilient. And they have the 16-inch range with the strength 9 gun, so if you get them, say, late in your reserve pool and things are already starting to get mixed up with armor in your deployment zone, they're a nice guy to have come off the back table edge. And you get 2 shots to start, but they're such a small unit, and you're not really going to be thinking about them if you're attacking Fallschirmjägers. Like, they're there, but you have so many formation platoons, like, just to take those guys off, it's not going to really do any damage to your morale. And you're going to have bigger things to worry about on the table than 2 little LG40s. I love them. They're cheap. They're extremely flexible. They're great as an ambush unit, or great for manipulating reserve. So I'd highly recommend just picking them up and putting them in your list. You look at them at first. They don't seem like much. But their versatility out there, I think, for what they can do out of ambush and then manipulation for reserves, I think they're a really, really good one to throw in there. Another thing that I like to put in there too, I used to love my heavy mortars for my Jaegers. I used to just like putting them on there. The three up strength and then the 3+ firepower. They were great. But now with version 4 and the evolution of how artillery and mortars work, I think falling back to the light mortars is definitely the way to go. I mean, yeah, you lose a little bit of the strength of the gun for bombardments, but your firepower is only one worse now since there are 4 instead of a 6, what they were prior to that. Plus you get smoke to it now. And smoke isn't as huge of a factor, but the way the smoke bombardment works now, that one turn of dropping a smoke bombardment, it can totally save you from taking some extra casualties as you're waiting for your reserves to come in, because most likely you will be a defending army in most cases. Even though, like, it doesn't say, it's not the same as it was in version 3, but I think when you play Fallschirmjägers, you're going to be looking to defend most of the time. If you're playing against tanks and things like that, you're not going to want to be the aggressive army against those kind of lists. So I think having the light mortars with their smoke, their ability still to dig people out with the 4 up, and you'll have another nice unit there. They're not super expensive, not super cheap either, because you only get 4 bases, and you are dumping you're dumping wasted points into the extra observers and command teams. Like I said, they haven't had the point adjustments yet, but everybody else in version 4 hasn't either. But I think for the German mortar teams and artillery teams, you're paying a lot of extra for something that's not there. But I still feel like the light mortars at their core, for what they can do to help support the Fallschirmjäger list, especially on the defensive end, by taking out some long-range guns or smoking out some observers and spotters by dropping those bombardments, you can really keep your guys alive a little bit longer and keep them in good spirits a little bit longer until your reserves end up getting on the table. So I think the light mortars are definitely a support option that are worth taking inside your formation platoons. Some other stuff in there, scout platoons. I think scout platoon for your list, I usually don't run them because I like to play my Jaegers a little bit more defensively and a little bit more cautiously. If you're a very aggressive player and like to really push the envelope, I mean, like I said, you have Fearless Vet, and they're going to be 10-man platoons. It's not a terrible idea to do it, especially now with the increased mobility. Like I said, the game plays a little bit different. In those scout platoons, that's 100 points, I think, for 2 of them for you to get that extended deployment zone. So if you really want to move up one of these units of your Fallschirmjägers or anything else that you have on your list that you want to be super aggressive with, I think they're worth it if you're using them in the correct play style. I think there's other stuff that's around 100 points or less that are better to buy if you're playing more defensively. But if you're more of an aggressive player and you kind of want to grab parts of the table or you want to get up in somebody's face, I think the scouts could be a pretty good investment. And like I said, they're 100 points too, so if you end up getting put on your back foot and you're defending, even though you have the scouts on the list, that's another one of those small units you can put toward your reserve pool. So like I said, the Jaegers have tons of stuff, and it's really easy to get to 600 points by just slapping some of those small units together and throwing them in the reserve pool. You can get to it pretty easy and still have a really nice core force on the table because most of your units are inexpensive. Some of the other stuff I was looking at too, like Pak 40s. I know for me, you guys have seen some of my battle reports. Since I usually use a lot of trap teams with the Bridge by Bridge book, and we'll get into that in a second, I don't rely a ton on my Pak 40s. I usually run my list with about 2 of them. And I keep them on the table. I don't usually use them for ambush unless I'm playing against a heavy tank list. I usually focus on my ambush with my trap teams and sometimes LG40, and I'll use my Pak 40s as more of a deterrent to take away like a third of the table and kind of funnel the rest of the person's list into the middle of the table or to the opposite flank, and then make adjustments after that. Like I said, because I like using the LG40s in ambush. They have a good enough gun to where you can set it up to hit side armor if you hold off and you're patient enough with it. And the trap teams for Bridge by Bridge are absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you can deploy ambushes mid-table in no man's land. You don't have to worry about hitting front armor with the ambush. You can literally place those guys anywhere and they can assault. So they do a bulk of the lifting. So I usually like to put my Pak 40s on the table as a deterrent for certain areas. Just leave them dug in, on the ground, and then at distance you're going to need 7s to hit in version 4. You can't hit them at all in version 3. So I like to use them as a deterrent with just 2 of them because I like to leave some other points open. If I played larger games, I probably would take 3, but since we only play 1,500 points here for the most part, I like to just keep them at 2. What else we have in here that I can pull out of this? The oh yeah, the anti aircraft guns. I love my flak reeling 38s. I absolutely love them. I think they're fantastic. They're a little bit worse now, I think, in this version because you lose that extra 8-inch range for your anti-air, so you're a little more limited as far as what you can reach out and touch. But they're a high volume of fire. I think they're really, really good if you position them really well on the table, and you can use them to give your infantry platoons some defensive fire support. They're gun strong enough to where you're going to be able to do some damage against side armor on some of the lighter tanks, and also like against half tracks or any kind of wrecky vehicles or any kind of like lightly armored cars. You're gonna be able to really take those guys out and inside that 16-inch bubble, and they fire out enough for shots too, where if you get them positioned close enough to some of your infantry platoons on objectives, they're gonna be able to give some defensive fire support. And they're relatively cheap. I know, like for the 2 centimeters, I think they're like 50 points, and I think for the flak ring 38s, I think 2 of them is like 70 points. And this is for Fearless Vet. It's a little bit cheaper when you do the Fearless Trained. So I think they're really nice to have in there, and if you put them in the list just for those purposes, they're great. And if somebody doesn't bring a plane, that's just another reason too. Like that's another one of those small units you can just tuck away in reserves. I mean, even have them on the table for the plane. The way the new rules work with you needing 5s to hits, they get a 3-up save, and then you have to actually be able to punch through. They're not as great as a anti-air unit as they used to be, and they weren't ever really that great to begin with. They were good. They weren't fantastic, I don't think. But I think they have enough other smaller roles on the table where they can be a really nice support unit, or you can just use them as a throwaway unit for your reserves, and I'll just keep them in there because, like I said, I mean, I've already named off for I think it's been like 6 or 7 platoons, just and that's out of your combat platoons, weapon platoons, and regimental support platoons that I usually try to funnel in there. So I mean, it's really hard, I think, to break a company of Fallschirmjägers. I think for version 4, you're really going to have to focus on taking an objective from them, which is kind of nice for us infantry players because we have so many little tools on the table and different ways to answer some of these situations and problems with these lists where I think it's a really viable infantry unit. I think it's up there with British or American paras as far as the most viable infantry list, pure infantry list that you can play right now in version 4. Some of the other things that I was looking at too, I love playing Pioneers. They usually fall under divisional support. You usually don't get them in your formation. I think if you play games above 1500, they're worth taking just to have as a 3rd infantry platoon that you can kind of plop down on an objective or come off out of reserve, and if you get the choice to put them where you want them, it's a nice second wave that can come in and maybe deal with some tanks that have pushed aggressively up the table, or and help to kind of reinforce maybe a beaten down platoon that's already there. Or you can start with them on the table. Like it doesn't really matter, I guess, in version 4 what you like to do with them. I like to play them, if I bring a 3rd infantry platoon, I like to have them on there, throw them on an objective, and then just wait for the tanks to either come at me and just get down and dirty with it, or use them as a deterrent and then force them to funnel their armor and everything else to the other objective on the other side of the table, and then I can kind of use my assets over there as more of a support, to more support the other infantry regular Fallschirmjäger platoons, and kind of help with that side of the table when it comes to dealing with armor and things like that. I'm not huge on the Flak 88s. I never was huge on Flak 88s coming out of divisional support as well, and I will be talking mostly about divisional support, I think, from this point out, because there's really nothing else I think that's really worth taking or mentioning inside the weapons platoons and regimental platoons. I'm looking at the book over here if you're not aware of what I'm doing. I like the Flak 88s for bridge by bridge. For that book, they're reluctant and they're trained. I think they're reluctant. They're reluctant trained. Yeah, I think they are for the Luftwaffe for bridge by bridge. And you only get 2 guns. So, the way version 4 morale goes right now, if you lose one of those guns, you got to make 5-up saves, and they're breaking off the table. If you lose one, they're breaking off the table. They do have a 4-up save because they're a heavy gun now, so that's a little bit better. You can get them dug in. I think you can get them with gun pits too. But I don't think they're any better for the Fallschirmjäger. I think you can get some better options. Yeah, they're only like 90 points for 2 of them, or somewhere in that wheelhouse. They have, like I said, they're the Flak 88. I mean, they got great range, great firepower, but with the bridge by bridge book, with the really dumpy morale that they have because they're reluctant, I don't think they're worth it in there. But I think if you're looking over at the Fallschirmjäger company from Fortress Italy, they're in much better shape as far as morale goes, and I think they're veteran as well. So they're going to be a little bit harder to hit. They're going to be a little bit harder to break off the table. And I think if you're going to take them for your anti-air or just another anti-tank option that's a little bit on the cheaper side, I think the Flak 88s out of the Fortress Italy list is much better than taking the one out of the Bridge by Bridge, unless you're a person who likes to take Von der Height with 70 points, because you slap him on that Flak 88 platoon, and just to keep him around for a little bit with his 2-up morale, that's not a bad option either. If you really want to focus on having some cheap 88s on the table that aren't going to break, you just pay the extra 70 points for Von der Height, and you get that 2-up morale save. And I think he also gives a 5-up, but I'm not sure if it's for infantry teams or you can roll it over to Flak 88 teams. I have to look that one up to be sure. And then plus, if Von der Height, you can just walk him away and use him somewhere else, because he's a warrior team, so I don't think he has to stay attached to those 88s. So that's something worth looking at as well. So another thing I want to touch on too with the Bridge by Bridge book, for most of you guys who play Jaegers kind of know, but trap teams, man, absolute gold. Version 4, you don't have to take Von der Height now as the 70-point tax to get to the trap teams. Now you can just take the trap teams on their own. So I think they're literally a no-brainer. You take 4 of those for 100 points. If you end up, and one, I think, like the hidden gems that for version 4 that people aren't really looking at either, is since it's not a platoon-based reserve system as it was in version 3, and version 4 is a point-based one, you now have 4 small individual teams that are worth 25 points each. I don't think they count as a 100-point platoon anymore, because I think they're independent teams. So I think you're able to use them in reserves in 25-point pieces. So if you have like 50, let's say you're at 550 and you need to throw 2 more in there, I think you're able to use them, because they're independent teams, as you could just throw 2 in reserve and throw 2 on the table in ambush, and kind of do it that way. And that might work out a little bit better. And I still think even if you roll from them in reserve, I think you still would get them in ambush. I think that's how their special rule works. I could be wrong on that. If you guys want to leave a comment on that, if you know for sure, based on how that would work for your reserves and not. But even if not, they're totally still worth taking in your list, especially for the anti-tank. Like I said, if you're running a pure Fallschirmjäger list, your anti-tank options are a little bit limited, so I think having those 4 trap teams being able to pop anywhere in your deployment zone and in no man's land, it's a no-brainer to take it. Another thing too, if you're stuck on the attack, a nice way to use them, like I said, is to manipulate your reserves and throw them out there, or they work really well if you have your full unit on the table. Since they work as independent teams, you remember how you send your 2 IC out on special missions? He wasn't worthless, but I mean, he really didn't do anything except for your company morale at the end of the game. So you can kind of use him to go, camp somewhere, try to take an objective later, whatever. With the trap teams, what I was trying to do in one of the games I played against Jeff when we did the Guards Lloyd rifles against Fallschirmjäger was, after I had dropped my ambush. Like I said, this is when I dropped the ambush. I dropped my ambush on the tanks, and what my thoughts were if he was going to overextend and pass by my Faust and just leave him in the dust, I was going to turn tail and push those guys on a special mission to go and just harass and assault either mortars or artillery on the back row of the table. It's only one base. After you get the shot off and the assault, if things go your way, fantastic. If they just leave you in the dust, then you're going to be playing, the foot race. You're going to be walking out in the open ground, chasing somebody. You're going to get machine gunned down. So it's better to kind of use those guys after that to maybe harass the back row of the table. Since you can deploy them in no man's land, you can deploy them aggressively. And then when you drop your ambush, even if you don't drop them by a tank, you can drop them by artillery. You can fire your Faust in there. Maybe you end up plucking one out. And then you just run in there and go for the assault. Those artillery bases, remember, they only have 1 rifle shot each. So if you can weather the storm and make a couple saves, you can get in there and you can just start wailing on some of those bases. Like I said, because they can't countercharge your counterattack. So you might be able to run them down and kill a couple of them, keep them pinned, and keep your Jaegers safe in that back line. So the Faust teams, they're fantastic for taking out anti-tank. But after that job's done, or if they don't have a lot of anti-tank in the list, don't totally discard them. They're really, really good if you use that no man's land deployment to drop the ambushes early in the game and then send them out to go do little special missions like I said, like harassing artillery, taking out mortars, maybe using them to kind of whittle down a unit that's around an objective and just kind of getting a little bit of a shootout, keep them occupied for a while. Maybe you peeled off a base or two. Like who knows? But like I said, they're not that worthless. And like if how the reserves work, like I said earlier, They're a fantastic unit for manipulating reserves, coming in at 25 points a pop. So that's Bridge by Bridge is definitely a way to look. For the Fallschirmjäger company out of Fortress, Italy, I know they're not a fortified company, and I know a lot of people actually like hate fortified companies playing against them. The games aren't super exciting, but you do have the option to take some fortifications. I think with this list, if I remember looking at it right. I might have been thinking of the Stutzpunk list. Right? Yeah, okay. I'm just zoning out here for a second. But yeah, I thought you were able to take some fortifications with that list, but it looks like you can't. But yeah, like I said, with the Fortress Italy list, I haven't gotten a ton of games under it, but it seems like at its core, outside of the trap teams and some of the other things that you can do with it, it's a very similar list, just with different divisional support, and your divisional support seems like it's I don't say it's better in the Fortress Italy book, but it has better morale compared to the Luftwaffe support that you get out of the Bridge by Bridge book. So like I said, I like to play the Elephant out of divisional support. There's some other options in there, like I said, for Panzer Grenadiers. I like Panzer Grenadiers. You also have options for like the artillery options that you have out of the Fortress Italy book as well. I mean, you have access to Nebelwerfers, just artillery in general. Like you still have your artillery batteries and all that kind of stuff to go with it, but it's a lot better morale. And you can get some extra Pack 40s in there as well. I think you can get like, what is it, 1 or 2 extra platoons of Pack 40s if you want to go heavy anti-tank in your list and load that up as well. So I like the Fortress Italy book. I haven't had a lot of time with them, but the one thing of note for that Fortress Italy Fallschirmjäger company is that you get better morale with those guys. I think it's a 2-up if you do the first Fallschirmjäger, because of the Monte Cassino. Like those are the guys that held the monastery at the top. So you get 2-up morale tests for your platoons, for your company morale. So like they have some serious staying power for all that. And on top of it too, like you get to get up. I mean, you unpin it on a 2-up. So things are really going to go your way. And then there's one special character that you can take, Jamrowski. He automatically unpins you. He's a little bit expensive. I got to look on the Warriors book, see if they made the points adjustment for it. But yeah, he automatically unpins a platoon. So if you put him on a key objective, maybe with the unit that's out on the island, that's not a bad guy to throw out there, because you know they're always going to unpin. They're always going to be ready to answer the call if needed. So it might not be a bad investment if you're playing a defensive list. For the Bridge by Bridge list, I've had some games under my belt with them. You don't get any special stuff outside of but their morale or anything like that. But Vonderheit's really good. If you use them to kind of boost the morale, some of your support units and the trap teams are really good for them. But the units as themselves, I think they play at their core pretty similarly. I think at this point I'll just end up rambling if I continue to talk anymore about the Jaegers. But that's just kind of my thoughts on how I like to build my lists for these guys. I like to play them really infantry heavy with minimal support out of the divisional sections. Like I said, maybe 1 tank platoon each. I really like to put the focus of what I'm doing with the Fearless Vet units that you get, and really loading up on a lot of those core platoons that you're going to get for your formations for version 4 for your formation morale. I mean, you're going to get 7 or 8 platoons in your lists, and that's really only going to get you to like 1,000, maybe 1,200 points, somewhere in that wheelhouse. So you're going to have a lot of staying power. It's going to be really versatile with what you can get out of those. I mean, you're going to have an answer for everything. It might not be in volume, but you'll be able to at least answer the call in certain situations. And a lot of the units kind of overlap, and they kind of help each other a lot as far as supporting one another and what they're able to do. So I think Fallschirmjäger at its core, still a great pure infantry list to run with minimal armor support. I think it can still get the job done. Definitely on the defensive end. On the aggressive side, as attacking it, I haven't had a lot of games where I've had to attack yet with them in version 4. I think as I get more games in with them, obviously those situations are going to arise, and I'm going to be able to see how they play. And then I'll be able to do another tactics video kind of updating how they've been playing on the attack and aggressively, as well as how things have evolved on the defensive end and playing with them like that. So, and this will be an evolving thing. And what's kind of cool too is, like, I know like some of you guys out there, they play play Fallschirmjägers. Even some guys over on the German Flames of War group for Facebook. Definitely worth checking out if you guys play Jaegers. There's a couple people on there right now that are doing the same thing, which kind of inspired me to kind of do this video, so we can almost pull together all of our all of our ideas of how we're going to play, as well as the results that we're getting, and we can kind of evolve how people are playing their Fallschirmjägers and try to make this a solid playable list in what seems to be a tank heavy meta right now in a lot of the places that are playing. So I'm going to leave it at that. If you guys got any comments or any ideas as far as doing more tactic videos, I think when we start doing some other stuff too, I'm going to do some more of these, not just for that, but some more on-table stuff as well for deployment and setup for version 4 and how things go. We'll do some videos with that as well, so it won't just be me with the talking head. Like I said, we'll have some other avenues to do these tactics videos. But like I said, if you guys have any ideas or anything that you guys want to see, any kind of feedback, just drop in the comments section so we can constantly evolve this kind of stuff, even some other lists that you guys might want to see as well. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys later.